Okay, Devin alcoholic. I'm really happy we're doing this. We have a smaller crew today, and maybe some more people will join in. As I think I've said enough. If you've been here before, I'm not super excited about a monologue because I always feel like we'll have a more exciting or robust meeting and experience if you guys have some questions or have experience. And the fun part about the traditions is um, pretty much if you've been in AA, you've had probably some experience observing um, in these principles or being a part of, utilizing these principles in your lives because that's what they are, is just a set of principles. And they're not, it's a little different than the steps. You can't really speak to amends if you've never actually made an amends. If you've never written an inventory, how are you going to be able to talk about your experience of writing an inventory? But because this is about the guiding principles that help us stay together as groups. And I would assume everybody here has been a member of a group, then we've probably experienced or seen some of the potential warnings and or situations that these traditions try to help us avoid happen in front of us. So we all have something usually to share about the traditions, and I encourage people to ask questions and cut me off because I'll just keep going. I'm really excited to talk about tradition 8. Might sound silly, but for me, I have a lot of experience around this, and I think it's really important. There's a lot of warnings for us here that I think are useful for us to be mindful of. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the short form of Tradition 8. It says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. And I'm going to read the long form, which is just slightly longer. It says Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or hire. But we may employ alcoholics where they're going to perform those services for which we might otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Such special services may be well recompensed, but our usual AA 12 step work is never to be paid for. Um, and so I'd like to just make that last sentence, I think, is the distinction because I at one point had nitpicked a lot about we define professionalism as the occupation or counseling alcoholics for fees or hire. And then it goes on to say our AA 12 step work is never to be paid for. And so I think this tradition is ultimately talking about is, we've had these little quips or sayings that you could have about a tradition. With the tradition of autonomy that you're self-governing, it's everybody has the right to be wrong. And with the eighth tradition, I think the thing I always come back to is Alcoholics Anonymous. What we do here is for fun and for free. And I'm reminded of the old timers that used to ask the question, how do you put a price on a gift? That I came here and it was the recipient of a gift, and you guys never asked anything from me. So how could I turn around and try to put a price tag on what was given to me for fun and for free by the love and kindness of strangers and other people showing up and answering my phone calls and giving me their time. And so what they used to call though, um, they used to have an idea for people though who did work as professionals in mental health or in the treatment industry or however that would be called two hatters. And so this isn't saying that you can't work as a professional in the field of treatment for drug addiction or alcoholism. Um, if anything, what Bill writes in the essay is it would be silly because, based on our experience, we may actually be able to be useful in those fields over certain people that don't have the experience of being an alcoholic or if you have the drugs thing, being a drug addict in your story. So by no means are we saying you come to AA, so now you can't do anything that has anything to do with mental illness, mental health. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying though is if you are in a relationship with someone under the guise of you being an AA member. So like I'm in a meeting, you come to the meeting, and afterwards I say, you say I need some help, and I say, hey, how about we find a time to make, get a coffee and we could talk about that, or you can come over to my apartment tomorrow and we can have a chat. So you've met me as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you've asked me for help as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you came over and I tried to give you an invoice and tried to tell you that, well, this coffee, I'm going to need you to pay for the coffee, but also that's $100 an hour for my time. And this is what it's going to look like if we go forward and you want to do those 12 steps. This is what it is. That would be the line of, I think, what Bill is trying to talk about of professionalism. That as an AA member, I'm not a professional. I'm an amateur here. And so when I'm coming to you and you're asking me for help under the lens of you coming to me as an AA member, I'm not ever putting a price tag on that. Which is a little different than what we'll go on to talk about of our service centers may employ special workers. Karthik, go ahead.
Yeah, probably I'm jumping the gun here. My question is, if I'm working for a rehab, like a treatment center, can instead of counseling, there, can I just go and make them do the 12 steps, the patient? You know, like,
So
can I take my sponsorship into a rehab if I'm being paid by the rehab?
it's a great question. Um, and so this is I wouldn't say it's jumping the gun, but this is I think is the heart of the consideration, especially today, because today um, the industry of recovery and treatment and all that is a multi-billion-dollar industry, at least in this country and probably global. I mean, this is a massive industry and there's big money floating around and all this crap, right? And so tons of people are involved. Um, I'll just give you a little bit of my personal experience. Like when Karthik and I met, it was the middle of the lockdown pandemic. That's where we got the whole virtual meeting space. So that's how this all came to be. Was we got connected because of this lockdown. And my career is I'm a musician, and that's an out in the world social community driven activity that all of a sudden was just basically destroyed. I mean, most of 2020, as we got into the year, I was expecting to be traveling and on tour with an artist for most of that year. Like into the fall, we already had a bunch of going to Europe, we did the US and Canada, we were going to Europe. We had all this travel plans. And then that just within the second week of March, that was just all getting canceled, email after email through that week. And I, I'm not somebody who's been, as an independent creative freelance person, I didn't have a bunch of money in the bank. So it was important it was like crunch time. We got to figure out how to make some money. We're screwed. The bills are going to keep coming and I don't know what to do. And this was before we had been officially locked down and before there was any offer to help and all that stuff. And so I made one phone call to a friend of mine, my buddy John, and John was the first ever employee hired at a treatment center in New Jersey for drug addiction and alcoholism. And I called John and I said, John, do you guys need anybody to do anything? All I've ever done is play drums and sell drugs. I don't have a resume. I'm not corporate America. Like I've been sober. We knew each other because he was sober. I said, I've been sober for at that point, I guess it would have been 8 years, 9 years, 8, 9 years. I was like, so I have some experience obviously there. And he knew, we knew each other through the AA and some conferences. And he just said, let me get back to you. We always need somebody, right? And so I ended up on this journey where I worked for them as an overnight housing tech, where I would just have these conversations, but I was just a tech. And then they brought me over to their treatment center and I worked the day hours at the treatment center. And I was the guy who did all the drug tests and gave the guy, watched the guys pee in a cup all day and checked all the drug test results. And it's very glamorous work. Um, but then at one point they invited me onto their clinical staff and they started putting me in classes to get certifications and all this other crap because they needed people who could speak to 12-step recovery. This treatment center's part of its ethos was it was started by some guys that were sober, recovered alcoholics, members of AA. And Richie's whole thing was we want to combine the spiritual and the clinical. And we want to do it in this way where we can offer people clinical, professional counseling and therapy and all the stuff that comes with that with social MSWs and LSWs or licensed clinical social workers, people that have masters of social work and all the degrees. But he said we also want to expose people to the reality that in their community there's a free resource of 12-step recovery, and we want to make sure that people are educated and understand that that's available to them. And he goes, if we do our job right, you're going to come to us and then you're going to go back out on the street and we don't ever want to see you again. And he goes, and what we understand is the founders of this treatment center is the vehicle that's going to allow you to stay sober and have a permanent change in who you are and how you live is going to be to go get involved in a 12-step fellowship that works for you, whether it's Cocaine Anonymous or gamble, whatever you got. Go get into a 12-step fellowship and get a sponsor and work this program. And so they had a whole program designed to push people into sponsorship and to push people into working the 12 steps. And some of that was incentivized. So you'd come to treatment and for 7 days you were in a complete blackout where you couldn't call anybody or talk to anybody unless you got connected to some of the guys that were there was like people that were sponsors in AA or in NA that would be able to come to these houses or would talk to the people and do meetings on the weekends, and that was part of the housing side was every night they're being driven to a meeting. And so Karthik's question is, where's the line between 12-step recovery and professionalism and clinical world? And what that place did and what I think my experience was that I think was really useful was they weren't sponsoring the people. So I became a counselor intern for a brief moment. They put me in some classes and they had me running groups, which they called 12-step education. Now, in a 12-step education group, my job was to do precisely that, was to try to educate people on the basics of 12-step recovery. Here's how those groups opened. We got everybody in. I would sit down. I would say, hey, y'all, I'm Devin. I'm one of the clinicians here. And it was very clear. Like, I am not Devin, alcoholic, member of Alcoholics Anonymous. At that moment, I am a paid professional clinician with, at that point, on internship hours getting accrued and going to classes. And I would say things like, we're here to discuss some of the basic principles behind 12-step recovery. And the goal of this is to just try to familiarize you guys with what this really is about so that when you're out of here and you go to some meetings on the street, you'll be able to listen and figure out who's actually doing this program and who's just talking. Because if you have this life-threatening illness, then chances are you need somebody else who's recovered from that life-threatening illness to be able to help you out. And the cool thing is this doesn't, this kind of treatment program of the 12 steps is for fun and for free. There's no copay, there's no insurance. It's available to you pretty much wherever you are in the world at this point. And if you mean business, you can show up and you can find some people that can help you. And so we want to expose you to this and be able to give you that idea. And so that was kind of how we would start, right? They were very aware that I was a clinician and I was here to answer questions, and we spoke in a general way, and I wasn't bound by AA traditions because it wasn't an AA meeting. And I'd make it very clear, this isn't a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're not here under that guise. Now, I fully disclosed that I'm an alcoholic. I made it very abundantly clear, and I shared my experience openly that I wasn't just somebody who had learned about alcoholism in a classroom, but I've experienced all this. And and I found, because I know the secret that we have here is that it's one drunk talking to another. I don't listen to a clinician. I'm not going to listen to a doctor. I mean, when I'm struggling with alcoholism up in my face, I wasn't going to listen to anybody telling me anything to do. But when people could share their experience and their brokenness and their hopelessness, I was open to listening to how they got out of that. Now, that's a line that I learned in these classes, that's a clinical line that a lot of clinicians won't cross, but it's not a hard and fast rule. They'd say sometimes self-disclosing is no good. You shouldn't do that. And there was a whole camp of people that said you absolutely don't self-disclose. And there was a whole group of people that said, screw that. I know the truth is that they're not going to listen to me if they think I'm just a professional here. So I'm going to give them a little bit of insight to who they're talking with. So hopefully they'll listen to me. But so the line though is I'm not an AA member getting paid in that moment. When I'm in the treatment center and I'm working as a professional in the field of recovery, I'm not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I am because I am, right? But I'm not being viewed as an AA member. You're not coming to that treatment center thinking it's Alcoholics Anonymous. You're coming to the treatment center going, I need professional help. And I'm here as a professional. I happen to be an AA member and I happen to be a recovered alcoholic. And I can utilize that to try to share with you. But there's all kinds of ethical laws over here that would basically prevent me from being a sponsor to that person. We have all kinds of, the ethics of treatment or the ethics of being a professional doctor or a clinician and that kind of thing kind of says over here that if you work with someone in a professional capacity, then that is your relationship, that we're not going to meet after hours and I'm not going to start sponsoring you off the clock, that like that wouldn't be a thing. Now, my personal experience is once that job stopped and music showed back up and, the world opened back up. And by the time it was late 2021, I was struggling to be there on a regular basis. By early 2022, I was pretty much out the door. In the last almost 4 years, I've been, away from that. And there were people that I met that were in there that reached back out after I was no longer working there. And we started talking and I did get to sit down and meet some of those people and do some step work. Because at that point, I was no longer working in that place. They were no longer a patient there. They had moved out, were in sober living somewhere. And they said, hey, I just always appreciated those groups and you really helped me. And, would you ever, consider that maybe we could sit down and do some work together? And at that point, it was like, sure, now it's, now we're on the lens of the AA thing. But the main thing that I got to do, and this was maybe the difference, is when we'd introduce this stuff to them, we would encourage people to get a sponsor, and I would get to find out where these people lived, like where they came from. And I have friends all over the place. And so what would happen is people would come in and they would say, I'm from whatever town in whatever state. And I would hook them up with my friends. And that was my favorite thing to do, is when somebody came in, I said, look, I can get you in touch with an AA member who I trust. And if you're willing to call them and start doing what they do. And so I would just hook up my homies over here and my friends with these newcomers. And that was awesome. And I think that's really what was great about this, was it was a clinical environment that also encouraged you to go get a sponsor and start working the steps. But that wasn't any of us that were the clinicians at that time. It was go out and get an AA member on the street and start doing that, and then come to this clinical program and we'll do all the other stuff that we can do here. Karthik, you raise your hand again.
Yeah, so what I understand is, if I'm a counselor, even if I meet them in the AA meeting after my counseling and when they're released from the treatment center, I still can't take them as sponsors, even if they want me as their sponsor. Yeah, of course, I cannot do sponsorship within the treatment center. That's what I understood from your experience. But let's say the treatment is done and the person is outside and is visiting the AA meetings, and I meet him there and he wants me to take him as a sponsor. So is that possible?
So, I mean, I feel like that is less skirting the AA question and more skirting like a professional ethics question, right? Which is kind of what I was talking, I think, a little bit about at the end, which is I've done that. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But there was people that went to that treatment center that were in really rough shape. And so, for instance, my friend Drew, I love Drew. Drew came in and he had been at like 20 to almost 30 treatment centers since he was 15 years old. He was now like 26, 27. He had overdosed and gotten hit by a car in Jamaica, Queens, and his neck was all jacked up and he could barely walk and he couldn't even sit without getting in pain. He'd have to like lay down. I mean, this guy was mangled, right? And he had been for 13 or 12 years in and out of treatment, in and out of treatment, in and out of treatment. And some of the clinicians around me, there maybe I can't remember if it was with Drew, but there'd be, you ever have difficult people, and if you're working in clinical as a professional, you can't just say like, well, you don't want it, so screw you. You know what I mean? In AA, it's like, hey man, do you want to do this? No, well then stop calling me. I'm not. It's like I don't have to do this. Like I'm doing it because I want to, but if you don't have any real follow through, then maybe I don't have the time. But if someone's coming to a treatment center, like you have to, they're there and you have to do the thing. It's a job. And there would be people that were difficult. There'd be patients that would come in that are difficult. And all I know is that this guy really was in pain and he was struggling. And I was still like a tech at the time. And I was running groups every so often. And I just tried to be kind to him. And he would come out and he would be struggling, and we would just have these small conversations. And then he was in some groups and we would just talk. And there was something, whatever it was, he left. And after he was gone for a while and no longer in the program, he did reach out, and I was able to go and meet him, and we did a bunch of work together. And like I'm pretty sure that guy's almost 4 years sober now, and we don't talk much. But like we got together and it was clearly like I'm not working at that center anymore, or I'm in an AA meeting and you're no longer a patient. And at that point, I think it starts to play into like more the ethical lines of, do I think that's something I can do? I think the same thing about, do I self-disclose I'm an alcoholic if I'm working as a professional, is kind of a personal line. Now, legal, there's all kinds of legal shit that I should know better that would get into like power dynamic stuff, but I just don't see any of that really playing into AA. AA's perspective is simple. If you're coming to me and you're asking me for help, like your description now, I'm in an AA meeting and this person that I had seen at a treatment center shows up, and now they're in the meeting and they come to my home group and I'm there and they ask me for help as a sponsor, as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can never charge them for that. Now, what I've seen that becomes crazy is people will try to leverage them. Some new guy comes in and you'll have all these people now over here that have opened up all these sober living joints. And some new guy will show up and they'll say, hey, man, I can get you set up. We got a great community of guys. We can get you rocking and rolling. It's just like, $800 a month. And it's like, so now we're almost inadvertently using the AA meeting as an opportunity to try to find new clients for my sober living. And I think that's like a tightrope situation. If all of a sudden I'm like scouring newcomers in the AA group to try to give them, I can get you some help, but my help is going to cost you $800 a month. It's sober living, and we got some outpatient stuff, and we can help. We can do all this stuff, and it's a little bit of a gray area there. My feeling is I don't want to have anything to do with any of that stuff. I'm good. I like what I learned about me personally in that period of working in treatment for a little bit. Is I really like being an amateur. I don't want to be a professional. I don't want to be someone who's getting paid to try to help somebody recover from alcoholism, because for me, the people that are the most effective to me and for me are the people that are just living their lives, and a big part of their life is put on a plane of service of trying to help other alcoholics. And I get to watch them live a life, and then I see them prioritizing coming to AA and making themselves available to drunks for fun and for free. And that is what's attractive to me. Um, Now I got to realize that I could do that, and I was really useful. And that's why they brought me from a guy who was the overnight housing tech at minimum wage all the way onto their clinical staff. And were paying good money for me to go and get certified as a drug and alcohol counselor in the state of New Jersey and all this crap. And I was willing to do that. I remember my prayers looked like, God, if you want me to go and do this, I will do it. I really don't want to. But if this is the next chapter in my life and you need me going here, and that's the story that I'm supposed to be involved with, I'll go. And maybe that'll be the journey later. Maybe later I will get to go back and study and get an MSW or whatever it is, and that'll be a direction my life goes. I don't know, but I was shown that I could do it, and I was good at it, and I could reach people and I could help people because of my experience in AA and all the connections I had. I could get people connected with AA members all over the place. And I watched some people come into this facility, start calling my friends, and I watched their lives change. And that was super cool. I loved that. Um, but selfishly, I just like being an amateur. I like I like coming into a place and people having to ask themselves, why is this guy here? And I think that's what For Fun and For Free does. And that's what our tradition's really all about. And what it really does, I think, is it safeguards what we're doing, that there's no profit motive. We talked about, we have a primary purpose. Our primary purpose is not to make money. Our primary purpose is to carry the group's message, or carry the 12, the message of recovery of the 12 steps, and that God is your solution to alcoholics. And we do that for fun and for free. So, the other side of this tradition, though, and here's what the last thing on that. To me, that is a warning to me personally as a member. If I start making a bunch of money off of AA, that's going to potentially be really bad for me. I have seen so many people, and this is not an exaggeration. I've watched, I don't know how many people come in within a year. They're fired up, man. They have had an experience with the steps, and they just want to help the world, and they get involved working in a treatment center. And a few years after that, they have pretty much left AA, and they're just full bore sponsoring their sober living, or you know what I mean? It's like I've watched people come in and just get spun out, because if you're in, and this is my experience, if you are going for 8 or 9 hours a day, sometimes 10 hours a day, because those hours and days will be long in treatment, and all you're doing is talking about recovery with brand new people, it looks a lot like sponsorship, and it can look a lot like being around AA, but it is not. And if I count the times that I'm talking to these people that are newly sober, or I'm running groups, if I kind of start to count that as 12 step work, big quotes, for the people that aren't on the meeting, big quotes. I feel like, well, I'm talking to new people, I'm talking about recovery, I'm doing service. No, I'm getting paid. They're paying me every 2 weeks a salary to be there and to do this. And if I forget that, what it's going to look like is I'm going to stop going to meetings on as much. I'm going to stop maybe being a member of my home group. I might not be sponsoring as many people. And if all that starts to happen, then I'm putting myself in a precarious position. And I think that's the big thing. I've met a bunch of people that start their own practice, work professionally in treatment, and then AA becomes an afterthought. And then those people ultimately usually do end up going nuts. Sometimes they don't drink and they come back at 20 years sober, and they can get situated again in the fellowship and in the program. But I've seen a lot of those people not make it. And there's been amazing stories of people doing horrific shit. Guys that were speaking all over this country over here, And then the big scandal comes out, exchanging sexual favors for beds at the sober living, with the guy who was the big time circuit speaker. And you're going, ooh, Mr. AA over there with 8 years or 10 years of sobriety talking at all these conferences all over the place. And then it pops out that he was allowing, guys to come in and get a free bed as long as they'd go and hang out with him and, sleep in his bed for a couple of nights. Right. So, you've seen all sorts of ways that this stuff can warp people. And it's not, and we're sick people. We're selfish and self centered people. And if you start dangling big money in front of my face, what that sixth tradition warns us, if I start worshiping power, prestige, and authority, if I start worshiping money, that's going to be really difficult. And so we want to keep all that stuff away from sponsorship and away from our AA groups. We had a guy come into my home group who was a counselor and apparently came up to a newcomer, and the newcomer asked him for help, and he told him it was going to be X amount of, you want to do this, it'll be $50 a session or $100 a session or whatever. And the newcomer, who was literally a brand newcomer, knew nothing, said, "Oh, I thought sponsorship was free. What's up with the money thing?" And this guy's response to him was, "Oh, I cut through all the BS." So this is a thing that still will show up. The next the next week, mind you, our beginners meeting was on this tradition. We talked about non-professionalism, and we made it very clear at the newcomer meeting and the beginners meeting. We said, if anybody ever comes up to you and says sponsorship costs money, run. Come find one of us that understands that's not the deal here, but that's not the deal. Um, and so it's important because you'll see it sometimes and people don't know. And if you don't know anything and you come in at AA and some person in the AA meeting starts telling you it costs this much money, you might not know any better. And then that could just, that's just the aftershock of something like that could be huge. Go ahead, Karan.
Yeah. So I know of a guy from India uh, who has a good time in sobriety, but he also now is working in the rehabilitation business. He doesn't
Sure.
have a rehab per se, but what he does is he takes very high-end clients. So he chips in with the client who's having some addiction issues, and they go through the detox program together, and they also go through the AA program together. Uh, he's a
It's
well-known
like
guy
sober
in our circle.
companion thing. They
Yeah, I'm
call
not
people, they have
taking.
sober companion over here is like someone who just hangs out with you to make sure you don't get drunk. This sounds a little
Oh,
different
okay.
though.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the technicalities. Yeah, he's definitely doing a lot of therapies and all the other stuff associated with it. But he's also taking them through the steps. But this is like a totally a paid job, right? But he comes
Right.
to the AA meetings and he says, the 12-step work that I do is not associated with the one-on-one business that I do with my clients. But I agree. I mean, in AA, he might be doing that. But when he's doing one-on-one business with the clients and taking them through the steps, that is not 12-step work, right? But but he's getting
So
paid
yeah, I
for
mean,
it.
you can't call it 12-step work. And again, it comes down to like if I'm hired for a company and they say this is what we're doing and I'm okay with it, I mean, I guess that's like your line. So my sponsor, uh, one of my sponsors, my buddy Bart, worked for 7 years is in a really established treatment program down in South Florida. And he ran all the groups for the big book stuff, and they would get people working steps, and he would get people through the first three steps, and he would show them how to write inventory. And then when they'd written the inventory, they would bring in alumni who had gone through the program to hear the fifth steps. And they would basically be trying to turn people around within like 30 days, have them like had an experience with this stuff and be ready to go out in the world. But they would also be connecting them with sponsors and making sure they had done that. And so again, it's kind of like if your job is, hey, part of this gig here is we need people to get through the steps. I mean, personally, for me, if we're writing an inventory and you're going to share that stuff, like I think you should find an AA member or somebody to do that with, and that would be, if you're asking me to take you through the steps, I'm not comfortable with that. Um, Now, can we sit and talk shop and I can show you how to do all this stuff and then say, like, hey, go find somebody who's, like, again, call my buddy, right? But it kind of, and at some point, it comes down to thine own self be true. It's like, hey, man, if you're able to be useful here and this is what this company wants and you have the experience where you can do the job they want and you're not an AA member there, you're considered whatever the title of the job is. As long as people know that if they come in and found you, if they found you in the meeting and asked you for help in the meeting, and you're an AA member at that point, that's where we can't be charging any money. But to me, this is where it gets blurry, right? And I don't want to live in that blurred in between of not really knowing. Like for me personally, like I just, what I got was for fun and for free. People gave me their time. They shared this program with me. I didn't come in through the treatment clinical professional door. I walked in off the street, cold turkeyed, tried to wean myself off slowly, basically, and I never went to treatment. I mean, I just was, for 2 weeks, I barely slept. I tossed and turned. I sweat. I kicked. I withdrew. And then I was here, and for 3 months I'd been trying to get sober. So it wasn't like I was, having the crazy withdrawal effects of seizing up because I didn't just cold turkey on a fifth of whiskey a day for a long time. But it was like, we tried for a chunk of months to get sober and was drinking a lot less, but still finding myself in a blackout on a regular basis. That when I finally got struck sober, it was about 2 weeks or so of not sleeping really, and then finally we were able to sleep. So I didn't have that experience coming in, and I think maybe that's why I'm a little bit cagey about where those lines are for me personally. But I mean, it's kind of the thing is if somebody wants to say that if somebody's only doing what you described and they're a real alcoholic and they are a member of this fellowship and they're not sponsoring anybody and they're not actually doing our 12th step, chances are they're going to struggle. Like that's going to be a death sentence for them, and that might be the experience they have to go on, is they might have to come out and struggle, and either they go insane at 20 years of sobriety, realizing that they really need some help, and they come back, or they end up at some point taking a drink and are gone. But I think that's like a line for each of us. Some people, I know people that are heads of treatment programs and they design all this stuff and they have all these sober livings and they're really useful and they help a lot of guys. And then they're sitting at their home group a couple of times a week and they've got a boatload of sponsees, and they're just helping as many people as they can. And then when they go to work, they help a bunch of people there. And then they're still sponsoring people, and those people are fine. And they're really useful to a lot of people. But it's the people that kind of fade away. And I've seen it. I've just seen it too many times. I've seen too many people that were super fired up about AA get involved in treatment and try to bring AA into the treatment world a little bit and, thump that whole thing in people. And then they're struggling. I got a couple of buddies right now that are really struggling. A buddy of ours that was sober 30 years, got involved in all kinds of treatment, was doing all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately, he was leading workshops like this drunk at 30 something years sober, traveled all over the world, just could, really had a moment where he couldn't get honest. And, almost, came back to treatment on a suicide attempt. So this is real stuff. If I've got alcoholism, we got to remember I got alcoholism. So I got to take care of that. And I take care of that by utilizing this 12-step program in its entirety. They say half measures availed us nothing. And so if I'm doing 11 steps of a 12-step program, I'm still involved in a half measure. It's still getting me nothing. If I'm doing 8.5 steps, I did a few amends and I kind of just fucked off on the rest. Mind my language. Well then, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm feeling like I'm having a spiritual awakening, but I've just had the beginnings of something and it's fading away. And if I come in and I get involved in treatment and that becomes my priority, I can lose sight that I have to be giving this away for fun and for free because I'm doing what feels like sponsorship all through the day, talking with all these other people. But I'm getting paid to do it. And if I forget that, so go ahead, Karthik.
So I have this brilliant idea.
Amazing.
So, Yeah, I know, man. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was we're going to open a nice big 100-bed rehab close by. So what I wanted to do was, go there and I'm not going to get paid, but go there probably twice a week and start doing a workshop or and probably if the people are really interested, also start hearing their footsteps. But I won't get paid. So is that okay? Like I'm not breaking any tradition, right? Or am I
Well, if you
affiliating with the rehab?
so you said you want to start it?
No, there's already going to be a rehab, but
Oh yeah.
I thought, yeah. So
No, no. This is we
can I?
cooperate, we don't affiliate. So like if I
Can,
want to
yeah.
go to a facility as an AA member, I mean ultimately that's just AA service right there. That's what we're supposed to be doing. When we
So
talk about
I can
CPC,
spawn. Sorry, I had to interrupt. So can I like go there and sponsor people in the rehab,
I
or
would say
just
absolutely. If you're an AA
inside?
member, if you're an
Yeah.
AA member and you have the ability to go and start a workshop and help people get through the steps and sponsor them. I mean, that's to me, if they're willing to do that and they're asking for help, that's 100%. That's
Okay.
like exactly what we're here to do is to go and carry this message to people that are struggling. And so if I have a bunch of guys or, some friends of mine, my buddy Dylan has found himself in situations in the two places he's lived in the last chunk of years where he reaches out to a facility, inquires if they would be interested in having a meeting, and then basically runs like a step workshop where he goes once a week and they just start and he just tries to take them through as much as they can before they go. And Bart did that for years in Arizona. Every Monday night he went to a men's treatment center. It would be 50 or 60 guys and he did a big book meeting with them and tried to take, these group of people through the steps and through the book and through the literature. And I think that's to me, that's service, right? If we go out, and our literature talks about this all over working with others, it talks about very clearly that we may not know anybody off the top of our head who wants to get sober. So go ask your local rabbi, priest, minister, or doctor, right? They talk about go find the alcoholic. And so with the treatment industry today, we can go find the alcoholic that's still suffering pretty easily, other than just cold calling people on the sidewalk or something. But so if I can go to a place and say, "Hey, I'm an AA member. I'm in. Do you have an interest in AA? Do you have any an idea what AA is? I'd be happy to sit down and share with you a little bit about what we do, and then inquire if you have any interest in having us bring a meeting in or a workshop in for the population here." And that's just the beginnings of what we would call CPC work, cooperating with professional communities. And so the other subtext amongst all this is, we cooperate, we don't affiliate in tradition six. And how we cooperate with professionals is we let them do the professional stuff, and then we hope that they leave the spiritual work to us. That they don't try to take people through the steps; they leave it to the AA members. And so if we show up and integrate into that, we could be the bridge in a lot of these treatment places, but it requires us to make a commitment and be there. So I mean, if you're able to find a place with a bunch of newcomers and there's a night that's open and they're willing to have you in, I mean, I would say go for it, right? If you've got the time and you can get a small group of people and you guys can just commit and be there on a regular basis, then get in there and see what you can do. I've also seen what could be is done sometimes is people try to start a group in a facility. And what I mean by that is a group gets formed and then they find out if they can rent a room at the facility that would be able to be attendable by the people in the facility. And so then it's like a meeting, not something that's required by the facility, but they just say, "Hey, we're gonna, can we use your community room on Wednesdays at 8 o'clock?" They're like, "Well, treatment's over. People will be around." They're like, "Would we be able to pay you a small fee to be able to use that room and we'll do the meeting?" And then at that point, it becomes a fully functioning group. And you could say, hey, we have this, people do this like Salvation Armies or homeless shelters sometimes or men's shelters. They'll try to go in and say, hey, can we get a room here once a week? And then it's like a group of AA people show up and they invite everybody to show up who wants to. But it's different than taking a commitment like I'm bringing a meeting into the jail. It's like we have a group. This is the group. We do service. We rotate service. If you want to join the group, you can join the group. And we're just going to be meeting here once a week if you want to come. And that can be, a way that it offloads the service from one person taking that one commitment to now we have a group of people and we'll try to get, actual AA people to come and make it a meeting. But so I would say absolutely. Like if you can go, if there's a facility that's down to have a workshop, go take them a workshop. Be one of the people that is actually there helping get these people through steps and get them all the other resources, get them meeting lists, get them other people's phone numbers, reach out to your friends and say, hey, can I put your number on a sponsor list and have a public sponsorship list that you can hand out to people and say, hey, here's a bunch of people. You can call them and get some help. And to me, that's the AA spirit of us carrying a message out and letting people know we exist. So I think it should be hopefully clear. If you've come to me and I'm an AA member and we're doing this thing, if I said, hey guys, like we're going to pass the basket, my time is for each person to pay $20 for the meeting, like that's me totally and in a sense violating this tradition. I'd be charging you for my time to be here and talk about the traditions, and that would be insane. And so that's obviously not what we're doing. And I'll share a little bit. Then there's the other experience about the ideas of conferences and potentially being a speaker in a place. Over here, we have all these weekends and roundups and conventions and stuff. And a lot of times the speakers travel and their accommodations get paid for. So like if I got invited to speak at the Colorado State Convention a couple of years ago now. And the Colorado State Convention is their area's convention, and their area has a budget. And so there was a hotel room and there was a flight and there was a person that was assigned to make sure that I got picked up and got all my accommodations to and from the hotel and all that stuff taken care of. And so I had contact with the member to make sure that I could get where I needed to go. But ultimately they they covered the airfare and they covered the room. And so that's typical. The conference that I've been presiding over is the quote unquote president of the board and trying to just get this thing off the ground slowly over the last chunk of years. If we invite speakers from out of town, we're either paying for a flight or we're asking them if they want mileage, like the mileage recouped, or if they want just gas and tolls. And we pay people and we give them a room so they can come to the conference for the weekend and they can hang. And what they're doing is they're giving their time for that weekend for fun and for free. And we're making sure that they're not having to pay to come and participate and be the speaker, but they're not getting us paid to speak, and that's kind of the line on something like that. But I want to talk a little bit also about the other side of this is that we employ alcoholics who are going to perform services for which we might have to engage non-alcoholics or professionals. And that we pay these people well. And so there is a need in AA for people to do jobs in AA. What are our service centers? May employ special workers, right? Our service centers, like if you have a central office, we have a local central office. It's called New York Intergroup. There's also, for other ones like Brooklyn Intergroup and Queens Intergroup, and those are volunteers, I think. Maybe Queens Intergroup has an office now, I'm not sure. But like New York Intergroup has an actual office in Manhattan. And we have an executive director and we have a staff coordinator. And then there's a couple of people that work part-time in the literature room. And the reality is kind of simple. There's a lot of work that comes in that has to get done in order for that central office to be able to be functioning and to be able to actually do the jobs we've asked of them. Now, within that service structure, there's a lot of volunteer 12-step opportunities. There's people that are invited to come and answer the phones, and that's a volunteer AA member signs up to be there and answer the phones. Now it might be all digital and call forwarding, but at one point when I first came into AA, you could sign up and just sit at the desk in the office, and if a phone call came, there was 4 desks and it would be 4 members sitting there ready to answer the phone. And our job there was to try to get somebody to a meeting. That's what they were calling for, is they need, if they need to find a meeting, then we're here to answer the phone and help talk to them and get them to a meeting. And that was volunteer 12-step service. And then there's committees, like there's the corrections and treatment facilities committee, and their public information committee. And so we had service opportunities for members to come in and chair those committees, and then do the service. But our director, we have a literature and we have a website and we have all the stuff that we have to maintain, and our director is there to make sure all that stuff gets maintained and is available for the membership to be able to utilize, for those committees to be able to use. And so the director's job is not 12-step service. The director's job is to make sure the office is running, and that office helps facilitate 12-step work. And that's what they're talking about in the second half of this tradition, that our service centers can employ special workers. It's a lot of work to run that office, and to make sure that all the literature is stocked and ordered, and to keep after the books, and to make sure rent is paid, and that the utilities for the space are paid, and just all the stuff that comes with running that as a nonprofit. If we want that to be effective, and I would say that we'd want our central offices to be effective so that people can find us that are from out of town, new people can find us, that we can offer these services, we need to hire somebody to do that job. And that's what they talked about. They said in the beginning, we thought we could just invite people to come in and do it out of the goodness of their heart. But, if you need somebody to be a janitor, can you just, sweep up after and make sure this place stays clean 5 days a week? If you don't pay that guy after 3 or 4 days of that, he's not going to do it. And so there are jobs that are usually administrative in their scope, meaning it's about filing paperwork and getting stuff sorted and all the administrative stuff that goes into, keeping our general service office running and keeping our local central offices working. That administrative type work that is vital for AA to function as it is and to be able to help people, that work is not 12-step service. That's not taking somebody through the steps, but that's enabling people and members to be able to have 12-step service opportunities. Those jobs we want to pay people for, because we want them to get done in order for us to be effective at what we're doing. So we have a bunch of staff at the general service office, and the staff at the general service office, a lot of times my friends that are there, they man some of the desks, meaning if you called AA general service office and you called the treatment desk because you had a question about something, you're probably going to get, I think my buddy Mike is now on treatment. He was at CPC. Every 2 years, they rotate around to a different desk. And then his job also, he's the secretary for the trustees committees. So he sits in there and he takes the minutes for the trustees committees stuff, and he organizes all that stuff, and he makes sure it's available. And he's a paid staff member doing a bunch of administrative work in our office to make sure that that committee of the trustees, whatever it is, the public information, literature, trustees nominating, whatever the assignment that he has for his 2 years that he'll be assigned a thing before they move, he's got a lot of job to do that is administrative, and we need to pay him. And we need to not just pay him like meager minimum wage, but if we want good people to come in and do those jobs, we actually have to pay them a competitive salary in the market that they're in. So our directors for AA General Services, for Grapevine, and for World Services, the non-trustee directors that we have, and for the executive director at our central office, is New York City. We got to offer good benefits and health insurance, and we got to have a salary that's competitive for you to be working as a director at a nonprofit anywhere else in the city. Because if we want people that are qualified that can handle that kind of work and do it effectively and efficiently and make sure it's done right, we can't undercut the salary for that person, or else we're not going to get qualified people. And so we do have a need for people to get paid to do certain work in AA in our service centers. And if we want those people to stay, then we got to make sure they're paid well, and we got to take care of them. And so we offer benefits and health insurance for all these people, and we make sure that they have a competitive salary in the market that they're in. And it does not matter that they might be an AA member; they're hired and they're working as staff. And in those moments, again, they're working as staff. So whatever they're doing on those hours is not their AA 12-step service; it's their job. And so if those people work in our offices and don't have a home group and aren't sponsoring people and aren't using this program, then they're probably going to be in trouble. Go ahead, Karthik.
So I keep, experiencing people haggling uh, for, saying that, we are a non-profit, so you need to reduce price for a not just for jobs, but even while bargaining for places and stuff like that. They bargain a lot. But I remember reading somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, but A pays $1 more, but not $1 less. So I just wanted, is my memory right? I think it's in A comes of age or someplace it's written like that. But I tell them even though we can't bargain, we have to pay the market rate or at least $1 more. But people say, where is it written? Yeah.
Well, and what are people? What are we saying they're bargaining for? Like,
They're
are we trying to haggle for a cheaper meeting space with the landlord, or are we talking about, oh, you're the director of
that
our
and
central office, so you should get paid way less money because you're also an AA member?
no, not that. I wouldn't say that part. Where you're in central office, usually those guys know the tradition, so they don't haggle there. But yeah, haggling with the landlord, or if you're doing an anniversary, haggling with you know whatever is needed. You have vendors, right, who provide things for your anniversary. So haggling with them.
I guess so. I would only have an opinion here, so I'll try to preface that this would just be an opinion. But I think ultimately, for me, it comes down to, what are your principles? Every group is autonomous. So if the group says, hey, we want to try to figure out how to operate on the lowest possible budget because we think that's going to be prudent and allow us to be able to be here longer, then I guess you could do that. But, I think a lot of groups, my home group has, I think, done this before. You would look at it the other way, which is kind of what you're saying, is that you might want to go to your landlord every so often and just check in and say, hey, we think we should, if your group is successful, it's like, hey, we want to try to give you a little bit more money. We've been here for a little bit of time and we've never really had a discussion, and it seems like inflation is real and money doesn't go as far. So, while we might be paying you $30 a meeting, we think we'd like to try to start paying 35 a meeting and make sure that, we're actually trying to show a token of our gratitude for having the space by, doing that on ourselves, not waiting for people to do it. And that's, ultimately with something like this, it would be about keeping good relations. If I'm trying to nickel and dime everybody and always like run a game on somebody, that kind of looks a lot like what I was doing before I got sober. And now that I'm sober, I think the goal would be to try to build solid relationships with people. And if it's a landlord and a home group, if I'm constantly going to them and asking for a favor and a break, they might just say, this is more trouble than it's worth, and pull the plug. But if we're able to see it as this is a gift and this is an opportunity that God gave us to have access to a space so we can meet, maybe we should try our best to take care of that and be as generous as we can, um, and show our gratitude and appreciation however we can. But I think it kind of comes down to, that the group of people, it's a group conscience. If a group wants to try to haggle with their landlord all the time, then, good luck. And if the landlord says at some point, I'm not okay with this, then they might just lose their meeting space altogether. And then you'd probably watch a group struggle and potentially not make it. So there's a lot of people over here that sometimes will go to their church or their place and raise the rent on themselves because they see that as an importance to keeping the doors open. Now, obviously, if you got three people or a really, really small group, you may not be able to do that. But if you have a group where you're starting to get some more people and you look at, we always got a couple of dollars extra every night. What if we, increase the rent $5, and maybe, it might seem small, but that gesture can go a long way. But I think that's one of those things where that's not necessarily etched into stone anywhere in here. That's just about potentially your own set of principles with that group of people and what you think is acceptable or a good practice versus not. Um, but so this main thing is they talk about, look, we talk about this more in our concepts that like if we need to hire people. We want the best possible workers and the best possible qualified people in all levels of service. And so we have staff positions and we need qualified people. We got to pay them well. I think that's what the long form says, that these people should be well recompensed. Such special services may be well recompensed, meaning they should get paid for the job that we're asking. If you're being asked to be a director of a nonprofit, you need to get paid the going rate for a director of a nonprofit in the city of New York, which is not nothing. That's a good salary with benefits and all the whole 9 yards, right? And if we expect to get people that have the skills, the professional skills necessary for that job, and we're trying to get it at a discount and nickel and diming ourselves, we're going to have an office that probably falls apart. And if that's the case, we're going to end up with all kinds of problems. And not to beat the dead horse, but when the pandemic happened and I talked about us getting into contract for New York Intergroup, got into a contract for $250,000. There's more to that story. And the subtext is the director, the young lady who became the director, my friend, wonderful AA member, wonderful person. She was so great, but she was early 30s and she was, in my opinion, probably best at the job that she had been hired to do, which was she was the website coordinator and she turned into doing a lot of other stuff at the office because it's AA and we always need people to do everything. So she learned how to do a ton of stuff. And there was a thing where we invited, basically we asked for the resignation of the prior director. And there was some animosity and some stuff going on, and it seemed like, hey, we might have grounds to try to get a new director. It had been 6 years or 8 years since this lady had been there, and the chair said, I think it's time for this to go. And the committee at the time, the steering committee and the board signed off on that, and we asked for this lady's resignation. And then we were in a position where we needed a director. And our staff coordinator, website coordinator, my friend, basically became the interim director. And and then the pandemic hit. And she just kind of became the director. Our chairperson at the time had never been a manager. He had never, it's a volunteer position as the chair of the board at New York Intergroup. That was a service position, not paid. But he had never really worked as a manager. He was a great writer, great AA member, 30 something years sober, loved AA, great guy. But he didn't have the necessary skills for understanding the process of how to hire somebody at that level of a corporation. And he didn't put together a committee, and we didn't get anybody there looking for somebody who was qualified. And instead, he just defaulted to our friend who's been at the office, who knows how the things work, who's answering all the questions, who's really making this thing go. She seems like she's qualified, and she was doing really great under normal operating conditions. But then when an emergency happened and the pandemic happened, it was just a little too much, and she was a little overwhelmed, rightfully so. She was in her early 30s, beginning her career as a professional, and was now thrust into this insane situation of a global catastrophe. And it just went really poorly. Um, And so what we want is we want to make sure we're looking for the best possible people. We want to make sure they're getting paid well, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of them, or else they're not going to stay. And it's of utmost importance for us to do that. So lastly, I want to take a moment and share about my conversation with my sponsor, Mike. Um, and I said, let me see if I can find. Uh, yeah, here it is. I said, Mike, we're doing these traditions and we're looking at how they apply in our personal lives and our personal relationships. And I said, all right, how does the eighth tradition apply in my personal life? How does this apply to a marriage? What does it mean to be a non-professional and all this stuff? I was like, I've been thinking about it. I can't figure it out. And he asked me two simple questions, which I'll bring to you. And there's more on his sheet, which I need to share you guys a couple. I think I still need to give us audio for a few of the last weeks. If we can maybe double check, I'll find all that stuff and get it over. But he said two things to me. So number one, he said, do you ever take the position that you know a lot of stuff about something, or you're a professional in some matter when you're an amateur? How often do I go and want to take the position that like I really know what's what, but it's really just my opinion. But when it comes to my marriage and this long-standing relationship with my partner, what I say is right. I'm talking as if I know something, but really I don't. And I was like, yeah, I can. How often do I talk like I know something when I have no experience? A lot. How confident am I in the hearsay of social media news or of whatever, thing you find? Yeah, I've loud opinions about stuff that I've never experienced. You want to talk politics? I've got all kinds of opinions on how to fix the world. I've never been in politics one day in my life. I have no idea what it really requires to do that job effectively. Yet I think I know how all these people can do it. What about sports? You ever watch sports and you think you could coach better than the head coach? You can call the plays better. You know what they should be doing. This guy's an idiot. How many times do I show up in the world and act like I'm a professional and I know something when I don't know anything? Good food for thought for me. The bigger, more important question he asked me was really simple. He said, do you give away your love and your kindness for fun and for free, or do you have a price tag on it still? And that one gave me some pause. You know, I've thought a lot about this idea of unconditional love ever since we had that conversation. What does it look like to be unconditionally loving? What does it look like to be unconditionally forgiving? What would it look like to be unconditionally kind? Is that how I carry myself out in the world? Do I give of myself for fun and for free? Or do I still hold those things back? Am I still a self seeker even when trying to be kind? Is our third step discussion in the big book talks about. Am I loving to my partner always, regardless of what's going on? Or do I am I kind to my partner always, or is that dependent upon her mood and what she's bringing to the table? And if I had a bad day, I don't need, it's like, where do I put conditions on these principles? Or do I try to give all that stuff away for fun and for free? And when he asked me that question, I realized that there was still a lot of times that I would be conditional about my kindness. Now I struggle still with the guy in the street, the guy on the subway asking for money, the guy begging for some change. I don't like that they have the power to make me feel a certain way when I don't have anything to give them and I have to just try to almost ignore their existence at times. I don't want to get involved in a conversation with a mentally unstable person on my way to work. I don't have anything to offer them. But why couldn't I just be kind to them? And so I started to really look at what does it mean to give away everything for fun and for free? And where do I have conditions? And where do I put price tag? Put a price tag on my kindness sometimes. If I'm in a hurry going from place to place and I've got a commitment to meet, that I might not be as kind because I got to get somewhere. I don't like that. I really have issue with some of that stuff. Um, Let me look at a few of these. How expensive is your love or companionship? Do you charge your partner a price for being in the relationship with you, and what is it? To me, that question is huge. Um, do you ever ask God to allow you to see your partner as he sees him or her? Can you give freely without expecting anything in return? Do you take hostages in your relationships? Do you feel that the other persons belong to you? Are you possessive of your loved ones? Uh, do you need the approval of somebody else to validate you as a person? Are you consistent about practicing the program principles or the program and the principles of the program in your relationships? So, to me, those questions have become immensely important. And I've seen that, as I move through the world, there's times where I want to withhold my love or my kindness. There's people that I want to put a price tag on. If you're going to come and talk to me or you're going to come and be a part of my life, well, you got to pay for that privilege. And who am I to do that? If it's my job, then that's different. But if it's just me being out in the world, who am I to deny you of my kindness? Do I do that at home? Do I do that with sponsorship? Do I do that with friends? Those questions really hit home. And that's one of those conversations that has really been fruitful, or these are questions that have been fruitful for me to consider. So I think that's really it for 8. Be curious if anybody else has any other questions or considerations. I would say that the brief overview here is yes, you can work as a professional in industries that look like rehabilitation of alcoholism or for alcoholics or drug addicts, but when you're paid to be there, you're not an AA member there. You're a counselor or a tech or whatever you are at that treatment center. And as long as you understand that in those moments, you are there not operating as an AA member, you're there operating as the position that you're hired for with the badge and the name tag and all that stuff. And that everything you do in that time has nothing to do with you staying sober. And if you're a real alcoholic with alcoholism and you have a vested interest in staying sober here, then you're still going to have participation in the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you want to cultivate that real inner freedom that a spiritual awakening will bring you, you're going to have to still sponsor people, have a home group, do service, and do all that. And that can be really demanding if you're working really like long hours in the field of recovery with a bunch of new people. It can be a lot. Karthik and I used to talk at like 6:45 my time in the morning when I'd be driving to work. And I would literally be on the phone with Karthik for almost an hour going through life and step work and sponsorship and whatever that was, to then hang up as I walked into this treatment facility and then get the drug, the report of all the drug, tests together, and then start an 8-hour day cleaning up after the people and doing the work of the treatment center or running a bunch of groups. And then on my drive home, I would have a phone call scheduled with another person who I was sponsoring that was available at that 4 o'clock timeline or whatever it would be. And I'd be leaving. So I would have been speaking to Karthik driving to work. I would run 3 hour and a half-ish long groups, write all the notes, do all that stuff, and then get back in my car and I'd be on the phone for another hour and change with another guy sponsor driving home. And that was, I think, what allowed me to be effective in that role was that I was still an AA member and I would still go and do the AA commitments and speak if I could speak and sponsor everybody I could and have a home group and try to be present to recovery and making sure that I was doing that. And the people that I met on the street that needed help were not apprised that I worked in treatment. That wasn't an added benefit. It was just, hey, this is my job. And I'm an AA member and I'm here to do AA for fun and for free. And as long as we understand where we are, I've seen it the other way too. I've seen people become treatment professionals and then they say funny things when they come to AA. They talk about, you know, in a broad sense, we're doing the recovery meeting or the 12-step recovery meeting, and they're talking as if they're still talking to a bunch of clinicians. And I want to tap them on the shoulder and be like, hey, bud, you're just an AA member right now. This is Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to like speak clinical speak when you're here. So it's just important to know where I'm at. When I'm in AA, I'm an AA member. It's just for fun and for free. And if I've got some letters after my name and I've got a professional career working in that field, then whenever I'm doing that, I'm being hired to do that, and that's what I am. I would go as far as if I was going to have to take them to a meeting, which luckily I didn't have to in person when I was doing the housing stuff. If I was working as a housing tech and I was there just because I was professional on the clock, I would not share in a meeting. That's my own thing. If my job was to get a bunch of newcomers to a meeting, I'm not sharing at that meeting. Even though it's an AA meeting and I'm there, like for me personally, it was like, well, I'm also on the clock right now. It's a weird middle ground where I'm being paid as a tech to take these people to this meeting. And I am an AA member and I'm here, but for me, it would feel wrong to like raise my hand and share and participate in that AA meeting, even though I'm a member, because I'm still in that particular instance, the tech. So there's like these weird hypotheticals, right? And that's like to each his own. You have to figure that out for yourself. Get with God and take a look at it. Does anyone else have any other questions about any of this stuff? You guys were having fun today. I don't know what was going on. A few times it was like a whole dog and pony show going on over there. um, well, this is really fun for me. I hope it's useful for you. Um, the thing that sticks with me the most, though, is what price tag do I put on my love? And I think part of the
So,
conversation oh, go ahead.
yeah, just continuing with that, I think we already spoke on a different tradition, but, definitely if I am paying for somebody like, their seventh tradition, I want them to be serious with the program, or else I don't want to pay for the coffee or anything with me, the seventh tradition. Because I have limited money, unless they come and ask me or request me, I guess, then maybe I'll think again. But usually I pick up people who are who cannot afford, but they're seriously doing the work. So is that putting a price tag on it? And also the second question, I hate calling up uh, people and saying I'll do a workshop because it's like, I feel that's pride, it's better they invite me to do a workshop. You know? Yeah, it sounds as if I know the stuff and I want to teach you that. So these are two different things, but yeah, I just wanted to put it out.
Funny enough, I was having that conversation just yesterday about that second question. And I share a very similar feeling about it. But so the first thing I would say, the bigger question is like, would you just sit with the guy if you didn't have the money to buy him the coffee? Would you still just offer to sit with somebody? You know? And I would imagine you would. So to me, it's not about, if I meet somebody and we're going to sit down and do some step work, a lot of times I'll try to, if I can buy him a coffee, I'll buy him a coffee. To me, that's an act of kindness that I want to offer. But if I don't have the ability to offer that to someone, that's not changing my ability to be to have the time to sit with them. But you may find that perhaps the only reason that person's there is because you're going to buy him a sandwich. And, maybe in the beginning, though, that's how that guy gets sober. Bart has his first ever sponsee was a guy in a sober house. He was 90 days sober, about 90 days sober, just about 90 days sober. And there was a guy who came to a meeting from a sober house, super angry, shaved head, tattoos, no teeth, like just hates everybody, hates the world. And his sponsor, Eric, so why don't you go at the end of the meeting? I want to go see if you can, maybe you can be useful to that guy. And when Bart went out and saw that I don't know, there's the whole story. At the end of the day, he starts talking to Gene, and he says, oh, he knew what treatment center he was at. And he says, oh, you're over at the whatever treatment center. He goes, they have visitors on Sunday, right? And the guy goes, yeah. And he goes, well, how would you like a visitor? And this guy, Gene, said, well, you bring me a sandwich? And Bart said, sure, I'll bring you a sandwich and I'll bring this big book. And that's how it started. Bart went over and brought the guy a sandwich, and they sat down. He gave the guy a sandwich, and he started taking to the book together, and they started having a relationship. And then that guy ended up having a tremendous journey getting sober. So I would say, if I can offer somebody something, I'm happy to do that. People gave me free stuff all the time when I first showed up, paid for my meals and all that kind of stuff at the diner when I was new. So if I can do that, that's great. But that shit is it's not like a requirement or a prerequisite, and it shouldn't be for somebody to show up. Now, again, my opinion. Other people do it differently. I know people that say, I'm not here to buy you shit. You're here using my time. So, if you come, this is on you, and, you should buy me coffee. That's just maybe different strokes for different folks, right? Now, I'm with you on the workshop deal. I would love to do workshops. I'd love to do something like this, but I'm never going to suggest to go do it. I'm going to wait and see if people invite me to do things, and I'll go if I'm invited. But I'm not going to force it into people, because I've seen that that's potentially an ego-driven thing. Oh, I'll go and be the guy who has all the answers. Just let me go do the workshop. But I think it is slightly different if I'm approaching a facility and offering a closed facility an opportunity to bring a meeting to them, in the sense of they might have a need. If I'm doing the legwork here and I'm reaching out to a treatment center and I'm saying, hey, I'm an AA member and I'm interested in seeing if you guys have a desire for an AA meeting once a week, and we were wanting to come and do that. And if they say yes, then I would say at that point, you can design the service however you want. And if you think what would be most effective is we get a small group of us and we do a step study here, and I'm just going to lead it because I'm going to commit to being there and we're going to get it going, then I think you could do that. Now, I'm also a believer in rotation. So at some point, you probably want to rotate, and you'll learn a little bit about humility by stepping away after a year or two, But I would see that as kind of different, because I'm taking a service commitment at a facility to bring them a meeting. And if I decide that the format of the meeting is I want to do a workshop series with these people, then, rock on. But if somebody, like on the street, hold on, what? What thing? Oh, sorry. My wife needs the carafe to make coffee. Um, if I'm going to be on the street and say I'm going to start doing a 12-step workshop and I just do it myself, and it's like for just AA people on the street, like I think that's where I start to see there's like an ego. And there's a reason why I've never done like the get everybody in the sponsor lineage together for me to do a meeting. And I literally had this conversation with a few people last night and yesterday afternoon that, like, I would love to have a step workshop that we could really start rolling. Um, but it feels like it would be ego driven if I started it and then I was the one running it. So I'd have, if people want to invite me to do that, I would be happy to try to figure that out if the time is there. But I feel like it's a little different if I'm going to set the groundwork to setting up a meeting at a facility, because then it's about making sure that meeting happens every week. People are there on our end to run it. And then perhaps I'm going to rotate away, and it's not going to be me. It'll be one of the people that I sponsor that will take over that commitment for the next year. And that'll be a temporary thing, and I'm just doing some service. And I'm kind of doing that at a prison right now, where I go by myself to a prison, and there's some women, and we're trying to slowly get them talking about inventory and talking about some tools and trying to show them how to do the program. And we have a couple of us that rotate around, but every time I go, I'm there trying to be useful and give them some insight about this wonderful program. But yeah, I would say if it's at a facility and you can get it going, like, rock on. But also you could make it a group conscience about them and say, here's what we're going to do. Then after a while, if some people are really doing it, you can open up and find out what they think is more useful. But in the beginning, that's more like the approach of 12-step service stuff. And I'd say, do what you want. Go ahead, Karan.
Yeah, my question is again pertaining to the treatment facilities of how we take a meeting or a group to a treatment facility. And it's in relation with the local fellowship that we have here. So it'll be a bit long question, so just bear with me. I'll just try to given the condition that we are at today. So the structured service hasn't been organized yet uh, to such a level where all the service committees are in place and we are the groups are building towards the structure. Until last year, we had only members individually going to treatment facilities. Just to give you a number, we have about 90 to 150 treatment facilities in our current city, but we hardly tap into 10 or 15 of them. And now we have a treatment committee in place, but we just take two guys going to a treatment facility, rotating every 45 days, so that the message is carried continuously. The problems that we face here are at least 20 to 30% of the people who are going are well aware of the traditions, the service literature, the guidelines which are there for the treatment facilities, so that they maintain those norms. But rest of them who are going as speakers, they haven't gone through the steps. They've just been in AA for a while. They've been sober. So what message do they have to carry is my question. And also, how do we evolve from just being two guys going to a treatment facility, talking about AA and sharing their story, to taking a group to a treatment facility? Because uh, the, we are still very immature, amateur in that respect in terms of service structure. Any experience?
A great question. And so first, I'll just say, I have no idea how that'll ultimately evolve or how it will end up looking, because it'll be your journey and your community. What I've witnessed over here and what I've seen be somewhat the guidelines that we've tried to do is I'll talk to the end of that question first. So there's been a couple of schools of thought. One is if you can get members to take the commitment rather than groups, that sometimes that's better because you just have a direct line of contact with one person. And you're able to just say, okay, I've got, if there's a committee that's like helping track all this information. Like we have a spreadsheet out. We say, here's the people that are going on Tuesday night to this facility. Here's people going Tuesday night to this other facility, and you just have whatever the meetings are. And we've approached this facility. They said they don't want a meeting. They want a meeting, but no one's available. Like, that's kind of how our treatment and corrections committees operate, is they try to get a spreadsheet going of everyone they've talked to, who wants meetings, who doesn't want meetings. Here are the meetings that are going. And then here's the contact person who's taken that meeting. And one of the things that we could look at is twofold. One is if you can get it to a group, you can make the argument that if a group takes a commitment, like my home group has 2 nights a week at a detox in Brooklyn, Wednesdays at 7:30 and Sundays at 7:30, we chair and bring speakers in to a meeting at a detox facility in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And as a group, we have access to all of our membership. We have, 50 or so people that came last night. We have about 100 people that show up on Sunday. We have, smaller groups for Thursday and Saturday evening. But there's a large chunk of people that every week we have part of our script that says, this group takes 2 meetings a week to the Genesis Detox in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And if you'd like to be considered as a speaker, get any more information, we have chairs at the group that you can speak to. And so then our group coordinates that, and we have group members that can reach into the pool of group members that we know and AA members around, and we can make sure those commitments are covered, and the group rotates that service, and that's great. But from the standpoint of the chair of the New York Central Office, sometimes they'll go, yeah, that's great, but then when the groups rotate service, we don't actually have a point of contact. If they don't let us know as a committee who the new contact is, then we don't have anybody to actually reach out to and find out if that commitment is still happening. So there's like this relationship sometimes where they go, it's easier to sometimes give it to a group because you expect the group can use the group's resources to make sure that those commitments get covered. But then the committee that's trying to oversee and make sure that all the stuff's being done, they go, we don't actually know who's going. So how do we contact that group if the group doesn't keep the line of communication open with the central office? So the communication can get funny. My experience is if you have a solid group that understands that level of communication, then they can make sure that doesn't happen ever, and that the central office treatment and corrections committee would have an active, up to date contact of the people doing it or the overall chair and a way to contact the group and find out what's going on and hear what's going on. And as members, if you're able to take that commitment, that might be easier because then they just have your contact and they can call you directly and find out what's going on with the facility. So I could see it being a little bit of it goes both ways. Oh, we just lost Quran. Um, and he's back. The first, the first part of the question, I think, it kind of hits to, we talked about it last night. Obviously, you can't transmit something you haven't got. It's in the end of Vision for You and Big Book. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. But obviously, you can't transmit something you haven't got. However, I'm not God. And I don't know what you need in order to wake up and be excited about doing AA. And maybe those commitments where you go to the thing, maybe that gets you excited about wanting to do what we're doing here. Or maybe somebody needs to see and hear your story because it's their story and it inspires them to leave that treatment program and get involved in sponsorship. I have no idea. I'm not going to deny somebody the opportunity to do service. If you're an AA member and you said, I'm willing to do that and we can get you in there, we should. Selfishly, I want to bring in people like me. I want to bring in people that have a solid working knowledge of the 12 steps, have had a real experience, because I believe that's how we can be the most effective in service. And that's what I'm about, is how do we come in and be effective here? But I also don't know what anybody needs ever. And maybe that's, what I've found is really simple. I've done a lot of corrections and treatment outgoing commitments. For over a decade now, I have been taking meetings into forensic psych units and mental facilities and detoxes and treatment facilities and jails and correctional facilities and you name it. I've done CPC work as the chair and sat down with clergy and doctors in their residency programs and talked about, I've just gone out and tried to do what I can as an AA member to let people know about AA and to find drunks to be useful to. And I want people that are doing that. And that the thing is, I used to think that I would be there to help them. That my job going into those facilities was so I could help them. And what I've learned is that they helped me. And that all the facilities I went to, I have no idea if any of those people have ever remembered a single word I ever said. But I still am sober and I have a home group, and I'm at my home group and I met people that have really wanted to get sober, that needed help, that came to the doors of my home group, or were at another meeting that I was just happened to be at and speaking at. And because I was doing that service, I was clear and I was able to be effective with them when they wanted it. And so I've learned that as much as I want to be like, I'm going to be the agent of change in your life, that maybe those service positions are for the AA members that do them. And is it possible that the AA members that show up and avail and give some of their personal time to doing service for fun and for free, not paid, go do some commitments outside of your home group. Maybe you'll get that little spark and they'll get you excited about this way of life that we have. And hopefully it'll get you excited to the point where you're willing to actually make sure that you utilize the tools we have. Just not drinking is not what we're about. This is not just about not drinking. If you treat your alcoholism, the reality is you won't be drinking. But in order for me to treat my alcoholism, I do need to live different. And I need to build a relationship with God, and I need to spend time in my life out there trying to help others. And that has contributed to the foundation of a new way of living that has changed me and has changed my life. And everything I've got today is a direct result of that simple surrender that I gave to AA 14 plus years ago, where I said, I'm screwed and I don't know what to do. But if I'm not surrounded by Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to be drunk and high later. It's going to happen. And, that was my sobriety date, August 28, 2011. I got touched in my heart saying a prayer after admitting to a room full of strangers that I knew I'd be drunk and if I wasn't surrounded by them. And I got that little tingle down my spine feeling. And I said, this is for me, and I'm going to do whatever it is. So yeah, it's like, I want people to come in and have that story. I want people to come in and tell the truth, which is, if you're an alcoholic, you never have to drink again. I want everybody to be super fired up and have a great message and be able to go and inspire the room, but maybe we're not all there. So I'm going to try to get those people to come in and speak, and I'm going to try to do service with those people, because that's how I think I can be the most effective. But at the same point, if you're willing to do that service, who am I to deny you the opportunity to go do that service? And you just might not be as effective. Maybe they stay sober as a result. Maybe that's the whole point of it. So, I don't know if that answers the question much, but I would say that there's, whether the individual signs up for the commitment and takes it and can be easily reachable versus the group, there's two schools of thought. I think that's like a try it on, see what works. Your area and your region and your city might find a better system than that, or a different system than that. And then, I would encourage, if you want to do these commitments, like, go have an experience. It does not take a long time to write an inventory and get clear of it and start making these amends and start trying to help others. Like, you could literally do that within a week. And that's how most of the beginnings of AA came about. It was people that sat down with their sponsor for a couple hours, and over a couple of days, they wrote an inventory, they shared it, they started making amends, and they started being the guy sitting there next to the new guy, telling them their story of how 2 weeks ago they were drunk and now all of a sudden their life's different. I mean, it was rapid, dramatic change that took place in a couple of days when we are willing to get honest. And so we can do that today. And if you've got some inventory to write, or if you got some amends to make, it's like, just go do it. What are we waiting on? Do you really want to play around with this life-threatening illness that maybe if I hang out for a few days, it'll be fine? Or do I want to respect that I have a stage 4, like, metastatic cancer of my soul, that if I don't get in there and actually treat it, it'll take me out? And then today I have the privilege to be able to consider, where do I put conditions on my love? And how do I go out and unconditionally love the world around me? And that's hard. I think that's all I got. I need to do some work, go check in with the wife, get to go play a show later. The next couple of days, a little busy. But I love y'all. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, because I think it is really important that we learn how to stay connected. We learn how to better play in the sandbox with each other, and that there is no us and them. There's just us. We're all alcoholics. We're all drunks. We're all members of this thing. There's room for all of us. We just got to play well with each other. And if we can do that, then there will be an opportunity for AA to exist for the people after us. That when I'm dead and gone 100 years from now, that I hope Alcoholics Anonymous is still here. And it's my responsibility to show up and try to be a part of that as a member today. So